met when we both attended the same high school, but George was 2 years older. So, and then we both went on to UW-Madison and were part of a whole crowd that used to eat in the Rathskeller at noon. And so after we married, we were in the military for 2 years in Germany. And then George coached and taught at Madison Edgewood High School. And from there went on to coach for the Badgers. And then at that point, there was a possibility of coming to Platteville, and he interviewed, and we came here in 1979. It was a wonderful fit, I think, certainly from George's standpoint.
Well, I remember vividly the first time, and it wasn't that I saw George Chryst, it was I heard George Chryst. I was sitting in my basketball office in the 70s over at the stadium at Camp Randall, and down the hall I hear this bellowing. I hear this voice that just boomed. And I was like, boy, I've never heard that voice before. I wonder who that could be. Well, it turned out it was George Chryst coming down the hallway with a couple other football assistants because they had to go by my office to get to theirs. So I had a chance to meet him there in the hallway, and I'll never forget that voice for sure.
First time I ever heard George Chryst's name, I was the sports editor of the Exponent, the campus newspaper. I was interviewing John Barth about the coach's coaching search. He was the athletic director at the time, and he put George Chryst's name at the top of the list. And so it was just a short time after that that George was announced. And the first season he was there was my sophomore year, and I covered the entire season at that point for the newspaper, and just developed a good working relationship with him as a source. Look, George was incredibly cooperative with us as media, and this was student media, and sometimes, you know, that was interesting, and there were different challenges in terms of how different kids handled those things. But he and I hit it off at the beginning. I had a great respect for him, great admiration for what he was doing with the program, and you could see it was headed in the right direction right away.
He always used to say, with any luck, if I can keep coaching, I'll get by without ever having to have a real job. So for him, the coaching and teaching wasn't really like a job to him. I think it was a passion. And so I think from that standpoint, I don't think, I think he was not feeling like he was going to work. I think he was genuinely fired up to just, tackle the next challenge, whatever it was.
The George Chryst Show with University of Wisconsin-Platteville football coach George Chryst. A weekly in-depth look at Pioneer football.
Favorite memory is it's the only title he won was Eau Claire game. Huge comeback. Platteville was getting killed at halftime. Half the stands emptied, and everybody thought that the game was over. And there were some blocked punts, there's some amazing turnovers and touchdowns. And Platteville came back and won the game. It was George's only title. We did a real nice post-game in the locker room afterwards. I watched him lead the team in the fight song, and it was one of those, it was a special moment. It's one of the greatest football games we ever watched. I actually did the game on radio, and then we were preparing to do the coaches show the next day, and just great stuff in that locker room.
Okay, man, we got a lot to be thankful for. Most important, be thankful for each other. That's what we said when we left here, and that's exactly what happened. You hung together, a lot of bad things happened, but you never let it get you down. And there can be nothing greater said of a man that he came to play, he came to win. He hung in there. Man, when we think of Ronnie Boyko, who's been on a scout team the whole damn year, and yet he blocks a punt that wins the game, that gives us a lead, that gives us some momentum, man, that's what it's all about.
One of the memories I remember was when we were in Madison. I was working at the Holy Name Seminary, and he had taught a class there, but was on the Badgers staff. And the head coach at the time said, I think it'd be good if we got away from the campus and got training camp someplace else. So George said, well, why don't we just go out to the Holy Name Seminary? That will be kind of away from the main flow of things. And sure enough, he and the priest who was in charge of the Holy Name Athletic Association convinced the parents that this would be a good fundraiser for the Holy Name Athletic Association. So they made all the beds, did all the cooking, and really pulled off the training camp the first year for the Badgers. That was a good memory to be able to pull off something like that, and have it be a successful venture for both sides.
My favorite memory of George, there's a lot, but my favorite one was early on when I was down at Platteville. Facilities we didn't have all the courts that they have now. We didn't have the PAC Center. We just had the gym. So you figure you got all the fall sports, you have football practicing outside, and there was the biggest rainstorm that I can remember down at Platteville. There was a lot of temporary flooding, and we had so much rain in a short period of time. So I thought that we were going to be moved out of the gym by the football team, because that's kind of how it worked in the high school where I coached, that if it rained and the field wasn't, then the football team came indoors and the basketball team, we worked out a different time. So I said to George, George, are you guys coming in? What time are you coming in? You're probably going to want to use the gym. And, I'd have been more than happy to move our time around. And George looked me straight in the eye and said, back in World War II, the theory always was, if you're going to fight in the South Pacific, you had to prepare in the South Pacific. Meaning, you don't just go, the weather's going to be tough, the ocean's choppy, the landings are, if you're going to fight under certain conditions, you better prepare under certain conditions. He said, I'm not bringing a football team in. So we had our regular practice, and I never forgot that. And I don't know how other people do it, but George is the first football guy that I ever met that said, hey, we could be playing a game in these conditions. So we're practicing in these conditions.
One of my favorite stories and one of my favorite conversations I ever had with him was not football related. It was one of Bo Ryan's first big wins at Platteville. And it was Whitewater at Platteville. It was a weeknight game. Williams Fieldhouse was absolutely packed, and it was one of those great games. It went down to the end. Platteville won the game. It was one of Bo's first big wins. And I remember the next morning I called George in his office, because George had told me that he was working on trying to get Bo to come to Platteville, and ironically or surprisingly, there was some resistance even on campus at that time, according to what he told me. So I just called him that day and I said, look, that had to be the vision. Last night was the vision you had when you tried to get Bo to come here. And I knew he liked that line, and he gave that little chuckle like he always did, and he appreciated it. But he was very humble through that. But you knew that he was the guy responsible for turning that entire thing around and getting the right guy in and to create that atmosphere that night.
There was no pressure on the 5 children to participate in any given sport. The girls gravitated toward the swimming and track, and they typically would do 3 sports, one each season. But I probably wouldn't have anticipated that they would, that their careers would take a different path. Those that are in terms of the sport of football, I think our son that was more at the administrative level, Rick, I think he's concerned about the future and the integrity of the sport and all the issues that go on that whole landscape. And I think that Paul and Jeep in their coaching try to work with the potential of each student. Our older daughter is a nurse and married to a coach and teacher, and I think she's saving lives every day. And then our younger daughter and her husband are involved in education and assisting the disabled. So I think each in their own way is trying to develop potential in those people whose lives they come in contact with. And he would always have all these phrases like, have fun, play the game, try and be tried and all that. And the kids would sort of quote that, but in a way it stuck with them, So I think I see each of the children hoping to influence their children and the next generation, to hopefully, help people and contribute.
He's just a man of his word. So honest, so solid, the family the same way. Just every Chryst that I got to know, it's all the same characteristics, the same ideals, the same energy. Well, I know Patty did so much at home, kind of like same situation in our family, because as coaches and recruiting and meetings and all those things, you are away from home a lot. At a Division III school, we did not have funds for assistance. I had to help them in any way that I could. So one of the ways, on the first three assistants that I had, they all stayed in George and Patty's basement. And they called it some kind of hotel, but I can't remember exactly what it was called. But it was so accommodating for the three gentlemen that came with me. Bo Jensen, Todd Kukan, and Denny Morgan are three guys that came, and then on and off they stayed there in their basement during the week, and then would go home on the weekends. But without George and Patty giving us that assistance, there's no way we could have had the program we had.
George just had an incredible passion and enthusiasm for his work, and then an amazing dedication and commitment to his family. And quite frankly, even as a college student at the time, I observed that, and then watched that from afar after graduating and staying in contact with him. But quite frankly, a lot of that was really inspiring to me, and he became a role model, and I tried to model a lot of what I did in terms of pursuing my career and then my dedication to my family after the way I observed how he handled that. It was really incredible, and it was impressive at that time.
You know, hopefully this is something that's celebrating George Chryst and his life and his legacy. So, you know, I remember very well getting the phone call saying that George was on a recruiting trip, had stopped at his mom's place on the way back, and that he passed away. And, you know, it was devastating. We couldn't, you know, it was hard to grasp. It's like other things that we've all experienced over the years, or if people haven't, they're going to. It's when somebody really close to you, somebody you believe in, somebody that you truly admire, and then he's gone. So, but he wasn't. You know why? His children, Patty, coaches, I mean, just everybody that was around him was able to take that torch, keep it lit, and just keep going.
I was sitting in my office at KDUB-TV in Dubuque, and a guy brought in a press release, and it had Platteville on the top, and I was always interested in something that said Platteville on it, and I looked, and frankly, I couldn't believe it. And it was the only time in my broadcasting career that I proactively just excused myself from trying to cover a story, because I didn't think I could think objectively about it, and so I didn't.
I think that because George died so suddenly, there was a very special connection with the players that were on the squad at that time. And one of the most memorable things I think I can remember from Platteville football is that the night that the squad found out that George had died, some of them went over to the stadium, and it had been snowing, but they just kind of had their own moments together. They wrote some really nice things in the snow. They kind of stayed till like 1 o'clock in the morning, and then somebody had put "Thank you, George" up on the scoreboard. And I think they looked up and saw that, and they said that's probably a memory that they won't ever forget.
Coach George Chryst's legacy continues to run deep through the success of his family, friends, and all the young men he coached, not just in football, but in life. The locker rooms at Ralph E. Davis Pioneer Stadium were built in 1971, and there is a pressing need for a major upgrade. The university is embarking on a capital campaign to renovate the locker rooms. Because of Coach Chryst's dedication to helping people around him and understanding the importance of practicing positive influence, the Pioneer Athletic Department and the University of Wisconsin-Platteville are proud to announce the campaign to build the George Chryst Locker Room. With your help, the George Chryst Locker Room project will ensure the memories, the values, and the life lessons George Chryst coached every day continue to be a foundation for all who pass through the locker room. Your donation will ensure that every student-athlete will leave UW-Platteville knowing who George Chryst was and the values he believed were essential to excel in life. George Chryst understood the success of an athletic program is not simply measured by a win-loss record, but through its ability to effect positive change on campus and community. We hope you will continue to believe in everything Coach Chryst stood for and the importance of ensuring his legacy continues to impact all who come to the University of Wisconsin-Platteville.
Well, knowing all the things that George Chryst did for other people to improve their facilities, for any sport, He was always trying to help other teams through the letter winners club, the different parts of the athletic department. He always tried to be as fair as he could to everybody around him, every sport. And you know, that locker room, a name, I just hope that the people that have a chance to see it, walk in it, change in it, play a football game and go to that locker room, prepare for a football game in that locker room, if they just reflect on the man and his attitude, his whole demeanor as far as helping student athletes, there was no one better than George Chryst. And the fact that they're going to do this at Platteville moves me and my family. I know that. And I just hope it's one of the best locker rooms that's ever been constructed. That's all I'm hoping.
I think George would love that. I think he always felt like, you know, the more team-orientated something was, the more successful it's going to be. And I think if all the alumni can help, you know, contribute and offer students experiences that they wouldn't otherwise have. I think when George was coaching, they had a chance to play out east once, and he loved it. He said, here are kids that maybe haven't even left the county, you know, and they're at the New York Athletic Club and they're at the Statue of Liberty, and that's an opportunity that they wouldn't have had otherwise, you know. And I think he was anything that you could, you know, use resources to make those opportunities available. I think if we can, if being in touch with everybody and getting former players together can result in improved facilities and you know, another impressive opportunity for kids, he'd be way fired up.